The Valero station on Route 19 in Upshur County, West Virginia, sat in the kind of hollow where the road dips between two ridges, and the cell towers on either ridge don't quite reach the bottom, and your phone shows 1 bar if you hold it at the right angle, and no bars if you breathe. The station had 6 pumps, a convenience store that sold deer corn and motor oil, and coffee so strong it had been cited by a customer as the reason his heart had started beating in a different time signature, and a parking lot that doubled as a church overflow lot on Sundays, because the Mount Zion Baptist Church next door had 32 parking spaces and 67 members, and the math had never worked. Emmett Torque Braswell pulled into the Valero at 5:50 on a Thursday evening in late October because his fuel light had come on 3 miles back, and 3 miles on a fuel light in Upshur County meant you were either stopping at the next station or you were walking. And walking in October in West Virginia after dark with a motorcycle on the shoulder was the kind of experience that teaches a man to pay attention to fuel lights. He was 50 years old, 6'3", 290 pounds, and he'd spent the last 28 years of his life building and repairing transmissions. Manual, automatic, CVT, the internal machinery that converts engine power into wheel motion, the gears and clutches and torque converters that sit between the engine and the road, and determine how much of what the engine makes actually reaches the ground. He ran Braswell transmission and drivetrain out of Buckhannon, a 2-bay shop with a reputation for rebuilding transmissions that other shops had declared dead, for finding the gear that was stripped, or the clutch pack that was burnt, or the valve body that was stuck, and making it work again, because a transmission is a system of connections, and a system of connections fails at the weakest connection, and finding the weakest connection is what Emmett did. His beard was brown with silver at the temples and jaw, thick, reaching his sternum, with a small brass synchronizer ring, the kind that sits between gears in a manual transmission and allows them to match speed before engaging, threaded onto a leather cord and hanging from his left braid. His forearms were sleeved in ink. His left arm carried a manual transmission in exploded view, every gear and shaft and synchronizer and bearing floating in anatomical detail like a medical diagram of steel, the input shaft at the wrist and the output shaft at the bicep with the gear train suspended between them. His right arm was a drivetrain sleeve, a cutaway of a torque converter showing the impeller, turbine, and stator in cross-section, surrounded by a differential and axle assembly rendered in blueprint precision. His knuckles were tattooed in block letters. Gear on the left, mesh on the right. Because gear mesh is the fundamental action of a transmission, 2 gears interlocking teeth, and the quality of the mesh determines whether the system transfers power or destroys itself. He wore a black leather vest with the Gearbox MC center patch, a transmission cross-section with gears meshing inside a mountain outline, his tail gunner diamond, and a small gear pin on his breast pocket machined from a synchronizer ring out of a '69 Muncie M22, the Rock Crusher, because his father had rebuilt that transmission in 1987 and given Emmett the worn synchronizer and told him to keep it because worn parts tell the truth about how hard a system has been working. Subscribe to Asphalt Angels and hit that notification bell, because this story starts with a boy who walked up to a motorcycle at a gas station and buckled himself to it with a seatbelt. And the reason he had a seatbelt in his backpack is the reason this story will keep you up tonight. The Gearbox MC had been founded in 2011 by Emmett and 5 other transmission and drivetrain specialists in Upshur County, men who understood gear ratios and torque multiplication and the physics of transferring power from one shaft to another. The club had grown to 14 members across Upshur, Randolph, and Lewis counties, all of them men who worked inside the machines that make vehicles move, transmission rebuilders, differential specialists, drive shaft fabricators, the men who fix the things between the engine and the wheels. The club's philosophy was from the transmission, Every gear in the system has to mesh. One gear out of alignment and the whole system grinds. Applied to life, the connections between people work the same way. If the mesh isn't right, the system destroys itself, and the first thing destroyed is always the smallest gear. Emmett fueled up at pump 2, hung the nozzle, and walked inside to grab a coffee. He was inside for 4 minutes. When he came back out, there was a boy at his motorcycle. The boy was maybe 8 years old. He was standing next to Emmett's Road King, which was parked at the end of Pump Island 2, and he was doing something that Emmett's brain couldn't process for the first 3 seconds because the action didn't belong in the context, like seeing a fish in a tree or a transmission in a bathtub. The boy was wrapping something around the frame of the motorcycle and around his own waist. Something gray, something with a buckle. It was a seatbelt, a vehicle seatbelt, the lap and shoulder kind, cut from a car, the buckle intact, the webbing frayed at the cut end where it had been severed from whatever vehicle it came from. The boy had looped the seatbelt around the frame tube of the Road King's lower frame rail, threaded it around his own waist, and clicked the buckle shut. He was buckled to the motorcycle. He was standing next to a Harley-Davidson at a gas station in Upshur County with a car seatbelt connecting his body to the frame of a stranger's motorcycle, and the buckle was latched and his hands were at his sides, and he was looking at Emmett with an expression that was not fear and was not hope, but was the thing between them, the expression of a child who is committed to an action and is waiting to find out if the action was the right one or the wrong one, and either way, he is not unbuckling. Son, I'm not taking it off. If this story has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Asphalt Angels. Because a boy buckled himself to a motorcycle at a gas station with a seatbelt he'd cut from a car and carried in his backpack, and the words, "I'm not taking it off," are the 5 words that stopped a 290-pound transmission man dead at Pump 2. Emmett set his coffee on the pump island. He crouched, slowly, the way you crouch near something that might bolt, lowering his center of gravity without reducing his presence. He was 3 feet from the boy. The seatbelt was tight. The boy had pulled the slack out, cinched it, locked the buckle. The webbing pressed into his hoodie at the waist. The frame tube of the Road King held the other end. The boy had engineered a connection between himself and the motorcycle that would require either unbuckling or cutting to separate. Okay, you're not taking it off. Can you tell me why you put it on? Because seatbelts keep you in one place. If I'm buckled to your bike, I can't go back. He can't make me go back. I'm attached. You'd have to take me with you or cut me off, and if you cut me off, I'll buckle onto the next bike. I brought 2. He had a backpack, a blue JanSport, faded, one strap held with duct tape. Inside the backpack, Emmett would learn this later, was a second seatbelt, also cut from a vehicle, also with an intact buckle. The boy had come to the gas station with 2 seatbelts because one might fail, and failure meant going back, and going back was not an option he was willing to process. Go back where? Home. My Uncle Dale's house. My mom left me there in June. It's October. She said 2 weeks. It's been 4 months. Uncle Dale doesn't want me there. He tells me every day. He says I eat too much. He says I use too much water. He put a timer on the shower, 3 minutes. He put a lock on the thermostat. He unplugged the TV in my room and took the cord. He eats dinner with his girlfriend and I eat after, whatever's left. And sometimes there's nothing left, and he says that's my problem. Last week he said if my mom doesn't come get me by Thanksgiving, he's dropping me off at the fire station, because that's where you leave kids nobody wants. If you're watching this story, hit that hype button right now. It's free, takes 1 second, and helps these stories reach the people who need them. Now, back to the story. The boy's name was Owen Pratt. He was 8. His mother, Crystal Pratt, had dropped him at her brother Dale's house in June, mid-June, the week after school let out, and said she'd be back in 2 weeks. She was going to Myrtle Beach with a boyfriend. The boyfriend had a car and a plan, and the plan didn't include an 8-year-old boy, and Crystal had made the calculation that mothers in bad situations make. The calculation that temporary is survivable, and temporary is 2 weeks, and 2 weeks is a number small enough to say out loud without hearing how wrong it sounds. 2 weeks became a month became 2. The boyfriend's car broke down in South Carolina. The boyfriend got a job at a restaurant. Crystal got a job at a motel. The phone calls got shorter, then less frequent. Then they stopped. Owen called his mother's number from Dale's landline in August, and the number was disconnected. He called again in September from the gas station payphone. The Valero had a payphone, one of the last ones in Upshur County, mounted on the wall outside the bathroom, and the number was still disconnected. His mother's phone was off. His mother's location was unknown. His mother had dissolved into the geography of somewhere else the way parents dissolve when the pull of their own life exceeds the pull of their child's need, and the dissolution was not sudden and was not dramatic, but was the slow evaporation of presence the way water evaporates from asphalt, edges first, then the center, then gone. Dale Pratt was 41. He was Crystal's older brother. He had never wanted kids. He had never had kids. He had a 2-bedroom house and a girlfriend named Shonda, and a life that was organized around the principle of minimum responsibility, and an 8-year-old nephew who had been deposited in his spare room in June was the maximum possible violation of that principle. Dale didn't hit Owen. Dale didn't need to hit Owen. Dale's method was reduction, reducing the resources available to the child until the child's existence in the house approached 0. 3-minute shower timer. Locked thermostat. The house stayed at 62 degrees all winter because heat costs money and Owen's comfort was not Dale's investment. TV cord removed. Eating after Dale and Shonda finished, which meant eating what was left, which some nights meant a half portion, and some nights meant a plate with grease marks where food had been, and nothing else. And the fire station comment, delivered in the kitchen, in front of Shonda, who had said nothing, who had looked at her plate the way people look at plates when the thing being said is too ugly to look at directly. If your mom doesn't come get you by Thanksgiving, I'm taking you to the fire station. That's where you drop off kids nobody wants. Safe haven. Look it up. Owen had looked it up. At school, on the library computer, safe haven laws, the laws that allow parents to surrender newborns at fire stations and hospitals without prosecution. The laws applied to infants, not to 8-year-old boys. But Owen didn't know that. Owen knew that his uncle had said fire station and nobody wants, and Thanksgiving, and those 3 pieces of information had assembled in his 8-year-old brain into a countdown, a clock running toward a date when he would be taken to a building and left there the way his mother had left him at Dale's house in June, and the pattern was clear. People leave Owen at places and don't come back. The seatbelt was Owen's solution. He'd gotten the idea from the car, Dale's car, a 2009 Chevy Malibu, that Owen rode into school every morning in the back seat. The seatbelt held him in place. The seatbelt kept him in one location. The seatbelt was the only thing in Owen's life that was designed specifically to keep a person from being removed from where they were. He'd cut the first seatbelt from the Malibu's back seat with a box cutter from Dale's garage on a Saturday when Dale and Shonda were at a football game. He'd cut the second from the passenger seat. He'd put both in his backpack. He'd walked to the Valero, 1.5 miles from Dale's house, a route he knew because he'd walked it to use the payphone in August and September. And he'd waited for a motorcycle with a vest because his second-grade teacher, Mrs. Keating, had told the class during a safety assembly that bikers in vests protect children, and Owen had filed that information in the part of his brain where survival data lives, alongside the location of the payphone and the schedule of Dale's football games, and the knowledge that a box cutter can cut through a seatbelt if you work it back and forth for 3 minutes. Emmett texted the Gearbox group chat, "Valero, Route 19. 8-year-old boy buckled himself to my Road King with a seatbelt cut from a car. Mother abandoned him at Uncle's house 4 months ago. Uncle threatening to drop him at a fire station. Kid says he brought 2 seatbelts. He's not unbuckling. Need brothers." GPS pin. Clutch responded first. Vice President, differential specialist, 5 minutes. Then Pinion from Buckhannon. Then Shift and Ratio together from Weston. 4 riders, plus Emmett on scene. 5 men. Emmett called 911 at 6:02 p.m. He described the situation. An 8-year-old boy at the Valero on Route 19 buckled to a motorcycle with a vehicle seatbelt, reporting abandonment by his mother and neglect by the custodial uncle. The dispatcher sent an Upshur County Sheriff's Unit, 9 minutes out. If Asphalt Angels has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below. Now, back to the ending. Owen stood buckled to the Road King for 17 minutes. Emmett sat on the pump island 3 feet away, and they talked. Not about Dale, not about Crystal, not about seatbelts. About transmissions. Owen asked what Emmett did for a living, and Emmett told him, and Owen said, "So you fix the part that connects the engine to the wheels?" And Emmett said yes, and Owen said, "That's what the seatbelt is." And Emmett said, "What do you mean?" And Owen said, "The seatbelt connects me to your bike. I'm the engine. Your bike is the wheels. The seatbelt is the transmission. Without it, the engine just spins and nothing moves. I've been spinning since June. Nobody's connected to me. The seatbelt connects me to something that goes somewhere. I don't care where. I just need to be connected to something that moves." Emmett looked at the seatbelt. He looked at the buckle. He looked at the webbing tight around the frame tube of his Road King and tight around the waist of an 8-year-old boy who had used the language of automotive engineering to describe his own abandonment and had been exactly right. A disconnected engine spins and goes nowhere. A disconnected child does the same thing. The deputy arrived at 6:11. Owen told the deputy everything. Crystal, June, the 2 weeks that became 4 months, the disconnected phone, Dale, the shower timer, the thermostat lock, the TV cord, the leftover dinners, the fire station threat. The deputy asked Owen if he'd unbuckle from the motorcycle. Owen said, "Not until someone tells me where I'm going, because the last 3 times someone told me where I was going, they lied. My mom said 2 weeks. Dale said Thanksgiving. I'm not unbuckling until someone tells me the truth about where I'm going, and I believe them." The deputy called Child Protective Services. CPS dispatched a caseworker. The caseworker arrived at 6:40. Dale Pratt was contacted by phone. Dale's response, recorded by the deputy, was, "Fine, come get him. I told Crystal I'd keep him till Thanksgiving, and I meant it. But if you want him now, fine. I didn't sign up for this." The caseworker asked about the shower timer, the thermostat, the food situation. Dale said, "It's my house. I set the rules. Kids fed. Kids got a roof. What else do you want?" Dale was not arrested that night. The threshold for criminal neglect is higher than the threshold for being a terrible human being, and Dale Pratt had maintained the technical minimum, a roof, a bed, food in the house, even if the food was whatever he and Shonda didn't finish. That kept him on the legal side of the line, while staying firmly on the wrong side of every other line that matters. The investigation continued. The shower timer was documented, a physical kitchen timer mounted to the bathroom wall with double-sided tape. The thermostat was documented, a plastic lockbox the kind landlords use, keyed, set to 62 degrees. The missing TV cord was documented. The food situation was documented. The cumulative picture was a household where a child's existence had been systematically reduced to the minimum resources required to technically qualify as care. Owen's grandmother, Eileen Pratt, lived in Elkins, 30 minutes south. She was Dale and Crystal's mother. She'd known Owen was at Dale's house. She hadn't known about the timer, or the thermostat, or the fire station threat, because Dale had told her everything was fine, and Owen hadn't called her because Dale hadn't given him her number, and Owen didn't know it by heart because he was 8, and 8-year-olds don't memorize phone numbers in the age of contact lists on phones they don't have. Eileen arrived at the Valero at 7:15 p.m. The lot was dark. The canopy lights were on. 5 motorcycles were parked at the far end. Owen was still buckled to the Road King. He had not unbuckled. 45 minutes attached to a Harley-Davidson at a gas station in October, and the buckle was still latched because nobody had told him the truth about where he was going yet, and he wasn't releasing the connection until someone did. Eileen walked to pump 2. She looked at her grandson buckled to a motorcycle with a seatbelt cut from her own son's car. She looked at the buckle. She looked at the webbing. She looked at the blue backpack with the duct-taped strap, and she understood that inside it was a second seatbelt because Owen was an 8-year-old engineer who had built redundancy into his escape plan the way any good engineer builds redundancy into a system. 2 seatbelts because one might fail, and failure meant going back to a house where the shower lasted 3 minutes and the heat was locked at 62, and the dinner was whatever was left, and nobody was connected to him, and the fire station was 3 weeks away. She crouched in front of him. She put her hands on his arms, over the hoodie, over the sleeves, holding him above the seatbelt, above the buckle, above the mechanism he'd invented to keep himself attached to something. Owen, you're coming to my house. For how long? For the rest of it. For all of it. Your room is ready. It's been a room since you were born, because I put a crib in it when your mama was pregnant, and the crib turned into a bed, and the bed has sheets on it right now because I change them every 2 weeks, whether someone's sleeping in it or not. You're coming to my house, and you're staying. Is that the truth? That is the truth. How do I know? Eileen reached down. She put her hand on the seatbelt buckle. She pressed the release. The buckle clicked. The webbing loosened. The seatbelt fell away from Owen's waist and hung from the motorcycle frame, and the connection between the boy and the bike was severed, and Owen stood there, unbuckled for the first time in 45 minutes, and he didn't run, and he didn't cry, and he didn't reach for the second seatbelt in his backpack. He stood still. He looked at Eileen, and she picked him up, all 55 pounds of 8-year-old boy, and she carried him to her truck the way you carry something you should have been carrying all along. The Gearbox MC of Upshur County, West Virginia, now sponsors a program called Buckled In. In partnership with schools, churches, and children's advocacy centers across Upshur, Randolph, and Lewis counties, they provide emergency placement support for children in informal custody situations. The kids left with relatives, with neighbors, with anyone willing to take them for 2 weeks that become permanent. The program identifies children in these situations through school counselors and community contacts and connects them with legal custody services and permanent placement before the fire station conversation happens. Every gas station in the program has a small decal, a seatbelt buckle with a gear, and the words, "You don't need a seatbelt to stay. We'll keep you here." Owen Pratt is 9 now. He lives with Eileen in Elkins. His room has a bed with sheets that get changed every 2 weeks. The shower has no timer. The thermostat is unlocked and set to 70, because 70 is what warm feels like, and Owen had forgotten what warm felt like. The refrigerator is open to him at any hour. There are no leftover rules. There is no fire station countdown. Crystal called once in December, from a new number, from somewhere in North Carolina, and Owen picked up the phone and listened, and Crystal said she was sorry, and Owen said, okay, and that was the entire conversation, because okay is the word that children use when they have processed an apology and found it insufficient and have decided not to invest further energy in a response. He still carries a seatbelt in his backpack, not the one from Dale's Malibu. That one is in evidence. Eileen bought him a new one, not a cut one, a keychain seatbelt buckle, the miniature kind, 2 inches long, that clicks and unclicks. He keeps it on his backpack zipper. He clicks it open and shut when he's thinking. Click, open. Click, shut. The sound of a connection being made and released and made again. His therapist asked him why he keeps it. Owen said, because it reminds me that I buckled myself to something and somebody stopped. That's all. I was disconnected and I connected myself, and somebody saw the connection and asked about it. The seatbelt didn't save me. The man who saw the seatbelt saved me, but I needed the seatbelt to make him see. Emmett still stops at the Valero on Route 19. He still parks at Pump 2, and the frame tube on the lower rail of his Road King, the tube where Owen wrapped the seatbelt and buckled himself to a stranger's motorcycle at a gas station in October, still has a scuff mark where the webbing rubbed the powder coat. Emmett hasn't touched it. He hasn't buffed it. He hasn't repainted it. The scuff stays because the scuff is the mark that an 8-year-old boy left on his bike when he decided that being connected to something, anything, was better than spinning alone. Be the one who stays connected. Thank you for watching this story. If it reminded you that a seatbelt can be a lifeline even when it's not in a car, please share it. Subscribe to Asphalt Angels for more stories proving that sometimes a child's survival plan fits in a backpack with a duct-taped strap. Tell us in the comments, what would you do if a kid buckled himself to your bike?